Hello, my name is Wynell.
And I am Mandy.
Welcome back to Real Questions. And we have been having lots of great discussions, haven't we,
It's been
about
so
different
fun.
things and stories that people bring us. Today is a topic that I absolutely love, which is education. I am a teacher by career, but at the same time, just love teaching full stop. I mean, it's definitely a gift that God has given me. But today it's more about parents and the choices for their children. I do want to say that we are not here to give a plug that you should do this or you should do that, because I really don't see these, and I know you don't either, as being like something prescriptive. It's really us just being real, sharing with you from some of our past experiences and other people's stories, and helping you maybe in things that you're going through to recognize maybe there's some changes that
Yeah.
need to come about.
It's real issues, real questions, real life. That's all it is. We're just putting it out there and giving you our perspective on a few topics. But all of these, everything that we're talking about over these sessions that we've had, are real questions that have come in at some point to us. They are
Yes.
real topics that we've been asked. Even this whole series that we're doing came. Well, I mean, you've done other programs like this, but really this discussion between Wynell and myself came from when we were in Uganda,
Yeah.
and we had a panel that was called Real Questions,
Yeah.
and we got some real questions.
Oh, yeah. We got some real ones.
And during that, I was like, man, we need to talk about this. There's real things in the United States and in other nations that especially in other nations, a lot of times things aren't talked about at all in some of these other nations. Everything's very quiet and swept under the rug.
Absolutely.
So
I think it's the fear of what's going to happen to them, and especially some of the countries that we're in is very man controlled, so they try to be very careful. But just wanted to really highlight today that we're talking about choosing the best path for your kids, and I know for a mom, at least, especially for me, I'm sure for you, Mandy, you're going to share a little bit about your own story. But today we have a story from a dear friend of mine in England, just talking about how that sometimes public schools are not the answer.
right.
And notice I said sometimes, because I'm not saying everybody should homeschool either. But just to highlight, in America, it is a lot easier to homeschool. In England, where I have lived with my husband for the last 12 years, it's something that you have to explain. You have to give a lot of paperwork as to why you want to do it. And I have friends who are homeschooling who literally have a government official that comes by I think it's every 5 to 6 months, something like that, to check up on what they're learning, if they're doing it correctly, if they're actually in a school, a teaching environment, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, but at the same time, I'm just saying that it's not easy to make that choice. But today, the story is just about if you have been thinking about what to do if your kids are in a situation to where that you feel like something needs to be done. More than anything, Mandy, I am shocked about the amount of parents that do not know at times what is being taught in school. That probably shocks me more than anything.
Yeah, we just trust the system. I mean, I'm guilty of that. I was in a situation. I had my two older girls did really well at school, and I sent them to school like a good parent does, and I just trusted the system. And then my third child, my youngest, had some really tough learning disabilities. I mean, she had some problems, and realized that I needed to ask questions and I needed to educate myself on what was happening with her in the school system. And I'll share a little bit about that in a little bit after the video. But it is really scary how many parents don't know what's happening with their kids in the school system, and especially young parents. Think about how many parents, they have kids young, and then they are just trusting the system to work, and they're taking them. They don't always know.
I was a teacher here in the state of Texas, where we are filming from. and I was a teacher for several years, both in junior high and high school. And I will tell you that it is incredible how that in other religions, I won't mention names, but there are some very specific ones that would come to the school with a notebook full of the requirements as to what we could and could not teach them, what we were told that they were not allowed to do if we were to do something in the classroom, and that they would have to be taken out for it, when that happened. And this is not a slam against the Pentecostal and the rest of the churches out there, but at the same time, I was shocked about the fact that I never had any of those parents come to question me about some of the things that, were being taught. So I think we do have to at least be involved enough that we are asking the questions. What is the curriculum? Where are the textbooks? I mean, pick them up, look through them.
Mhm.
Find out what the teachers are like, and, maybe ask your kids a few more questions. I know they don't like being quizzed, and feeling like it's an interrogation session, but this is where I feel like sitting around the dinner table at night is missed, because I know when I was growing up, that was a big thing. We always ate dinner together, and hey, had to go at school today, what happened, what was going on, and kids could share, and we shared, oh, so-and-so did this, or the teacher taught us that. So sometimes we just don't want to hear, and we just sort of exempt ourselves from that. So we're going to go to a story from a friend of mine who's just going to share about why she made the decision to homeschool and the incredible work that she's doing with her homeschooling.
Hello, my name's Naomi. I'm from Portsmouth in the UK. I'm married to Deepak from India, and we have 3 children. Esther, who's 7, Jonah, who's 6, and Jessie, who's 5. And for the last 4 years, we've been home educating our children. How did we arrive at the decision to home educate? Well, it's quite interesting, really, because I had a really fantastic experience of school. I loved every minute of it, and it was a really great opportunity for me as a young Christian to kind of really share my faith with my peers and teachers, and also have an opportunity to stand up for Jesus in an environment that wasn't always doing that. So I never really thought that home education was an option. To be honest, when I thought about home educating, I thought it was for people that were a little bit more weird and wacky, a little bit alternative lifestyle, or maybe people that had kind of separation anxiety, didn't want to be away from their children. That's kind of who I thought home educated. And then I met a friend of mine who I grew up with in church, and she has 4 children, and she was home educating all her 4 children. And I just got chatting with her, and I just saw the freedom that she had and that they had as a family to kind of really invest in their children's lives, on all sorts of levels, spiritually, academically, developing life skills and friendships and relationships and things. And I was just like, wow, this just looks really amazing. So my husband and I discussed it and prayed about it, and just really felt that this would be something that we might consider for our children, especially the way schools are going in England, taking God completely out of the equation and bringing all sorts of things in that really aren't helpful or necessary for children to learn about or find out about at such a young age, and from a kind of a negative viewpoint, or not one that kind of matches our biblical viewpoint. So we gave it a try, just had a little trial run with our eldest daughter, and we just found that it was a really great time for us to have some real nice quality family time together. And it was just a really, really wonderful time. So we made the decision just before she was about to start school that we would indeed home educate, and we've never looked back. It's been an incredible journey so far. All 3 of our children are now on board with home educating. We do so much during the week. We have a lot of time where we're at home, kind of looking at maths and English and geography and history, all the typical things that they might do at school. And then we have plenty of time as well outside and connecting with other people. We're part of lots of different groups and activities and things. And it's just been a really, really incredible experience for us all as a family. And I think our family values, come from Deuteronomy chapter 6, which says, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you are at home, when you're on the road, when you are going to bed, and when you are getting up. And that's something that's really important for us as a family, that we are investing, especially in our children, that time where they can really grow in their faith and understanding of Jesus and what he's done for them. And we just feel that when we home educate, we have that quality time where we can spend a lot more time focused on, devotion and Bible study and prayer together. And, we don't have the kind of rushing, getting ready for school and the school run and picking them up after school and then being tired and got to do homework and then not much time for that quality family time. So for us, it's been a real blessing. And for me, my greatest passion is to see people become Christians, give their life to Jesus, and then have an opportunity to disciple them. And that's the same with our children as well. We want to have that opportunity to disciple them and to help them grow into real godly men and women who serve God and then disciple other people themselves. And we just feel that home educating is a really great opportunity for us to do that. I know a lot of people say, oh, when you home educate, what about socialising? It's funny because I always remember when I was at school, the teachers would say, you're here to learn, not to socialise. So school isn't necessarily supposed to be a place where you can socialise. And also, it's forced association. You're put into a classroom with 30 other children your same age. Whereas my children have the opportunity to be friends with a whole range of children and adults as well. My little boy, Jesse's 5, his best friend is 13, and they just have such a special relationship, and it's really lovely to see that growing. If they were in school, they probably wouldn't have that opportunity to have that closeness and, even connect with each other. So that's a really great opportunity they have as well. If you're thinking about home educating, it's definitely something to consider if you want to have that quality family time. It is obviously a huge investment. It takes a lot of commitment and time from myself, and my husband gets involved at times as well. It is 24/7. But we do have opportunities where the children go off to different activities and events and things where they have their freedom away from the family and parents as well, which is good for them too. So yeah, for us, home educating is a really fantastic opportunity for us to really develop our children's gifts and skills, and just to see God really at work in their lives and have that quality time together as a family and invest in each other's faith journey. And for me especially as well, as a mum, my faith has really strengthened as a result of seeing my children developing and strengthening on this home educating journey.
Well, Mandy, what an incredible story, eh?
So amazing.
Obviously, this is across the globe in England, but the job that she is doing is something that I wouldn't expect most parents to do. But just that going above and beyond and being able to be a stay-at-home mom and be an educator, which that does make a big difference.
It does, yeah.
When you have that possibility, isn't it?
Right. And it's such a tough decision for people to make. I'm for those of you that don't know, I interpret dreams quite a bit. And I had a dream come in recently from a woman in ministry, actually, and she was telling we interpreted the dream, but after we interpreted it, we kind of talked it out, and I realized what this was about. It was all about homeschooling. It was about, she was in the middle of making this decision, and her children were struggling with this decision, and she was trying to make the decision of what was best for them, and it was so hard because she didn't want to hurt her children or do the wrong thing, and I could just see the turmoil in her as she was trying to do what God was calling her to do for her children, and also doing what she believed was right for them in the midst of, of them not wanting to stifle what their friendships or their social network and those kind of things.
Absolutely. So our particular story today obviously is about a mom who did homeschool, and that was the choice that she made. 3 children. And she has, as I've already said, she's got that luxury of being able to stay at home and be able to just devote her time to that. And therefore, they get out and do a number of things that's outside the home. And I just wanted to highlight that, some of the things that make it very different and difficult for when you're trying to find alternatives, if you feel like that the public school is just literally not the answer, is, the questions that usually get asked is, how can I find the time to homeschool? Am I actually qualified to teach my children? And the number one question that I hear from parents all day long is the socialization, the
Yeah.
being at home, never being out with other kids, just kind of us four and no more. And so they sort of lose that aspect of learning that side of it. So I would say that, if it's just strictly a problem that they're struggling to make friends, I mentor also young girls that parents asked me to help them with. And I was mentoring a girl yesterday in England that was sharing. She literally said to me, she's 13, and said, "How do you make friends when people don't want to make friends?" And that's a tough question, and I felt sorry for her, but I was trying to encourage her that, even if she only had 2 or 3, that was better than having none. If she could at least focus on that it wasn't that maybe the need wasn't just to be friends with the whole class. But I also was just saying to her that right now, even though you may not want to hear this, really your education is the number one focus for you right now. And even though it's important to have friends, try to focus on, getting through this and recognizing that this is going to be for your future.
Yeah. I remember when I was about 13, or in that range, I was at a youth group, and my youth pastor, and I was insecure. I had a lot of, it's kind of like this 13-year-old girl you're probably talking about, and had a lot of trauma that I was kind of healing from. And I asked him that same question. I said, how can I make friends? I don't have any friends, and really wounded when I said it. Really, really hurt, because I did feel very, very alone. And his off the cuff response was, "Well, be friendly." And I remember thinking, that's not the answer I want to hear. That's a horrible answer. I need you to feel sorry for me. I need you to tell me how, what people are doing wrong. Don't tell me what I have to do. And I walked away from that conversation thinking that was just the worst answer ever. But you know what? I'm in my late 40s, and I still remember that answer, and I still know, and I've learned to be friendly. I have learned, I'm naturally not the most extroverted person, but I've learned to be friendly, and it helps with that.
I was going to say, I think there's a lot of adults that probably need to hear that, because my pastor, even in England, would say to the same when people come, "Oh, just no one talks to me. No one wants to be my friend." And he'd say, "Well, have you been friendly to them?
Yeah.
Have you gone up and said hello to them?" They're like, no, no.
They got off topic.
Yeah,
but I had
absolutely.
To share.
But still,
somebody
it is
needed
important.
to hear it.
But absolutely. I would say that if that's the only reason, that's not a very good, valid reason to be saying, "Oh, that's it. I'm going to take them out of school." I think that's a teaching point,
Right?
That, to try to help them understand how to do that. But 100% find out what they are being taught and fight against that. You can do it in the right way, but speak out and let them know, "No, I don't want my kids being exposed to this." And, they, find a way to work around that. And also, Mandy, again, this goes back to the strength of the home, the importance of what we teach them at home, because, if they are going to public school, a lot of people don't stop to think how many hours per week that means that they are under the teaching, mentorship, leadership, and care of other people who predominantly may not be Christian. So, even if you only took an average of 9 hours a day, you do 9 times 5, that's already, 45 hours that week.
Mm-hmm.
And that's 45 hours that you have not spent with them. And so you figure that when they come home, they then come home, they do homework, they eat dinner, they go to bed. You virtually had not even hardly 10% of that time that you spend with them.
Right.
And then on the weekends, maybe they're out or maybe you're out, whatever. But it's just something to consider, that you must find a way to do things at home that help them also grow a defensive mechanism. I mean, Mandy, when I was 12, when we were in Colombia living already, we went to the field. My parents were missionaries. We went to the field when I was 6 years old. I did go to English schools that were put there mainly for children of the military. But if you were an American family and needed a school to go to, they had to make room for you. But there were a couple of them that didn't abide by the rules, and to fight that meant a lot. So in one of the cities that we lived in Columbia on the coast, in the end, my parents had to finally put me into a private Catholic school. Now, the teaching and the education I got was amazing. The religious class, however, was a Catholic class where they talked about how many idols you had prayed to, and how many Hail Marys you had said, and I was 12, and I just stood up and said, "No, I'm sorry. You're not supposed to be, praying to anyone else but Jesus," and I didn't know any different because at home, I knew what I was being taught. In the end, I got sent to the Mother Superior, and they had to make a decision to just remove me from the class. So I sat in her office
Wow.
during that class. But it's just showing you that you can teach your children what's
Yeah.
right and wrong, that it's not always the answer, just that's it,
Yeah.
I'm taking you out.
It's also about really what is best for your kids. What does your
Absolutely.
kids need? I know in my situation, it was a little bit different as far as I did work full time, and I'm not a natural teacher. It's not something I'm good at. It's not something that I would have the patience for. But when my daughter was around we noticed in kindergarten, we noticed immediately that we felt like she had dyslexia, or there was something that was, her writing, some stuff was off. And in Texas, they wouldn't even talk to you. Like if you went and talked, the teacher told us. The teacher said, "Hey, I'm just letting you know they're not going to test her, but I think she has dyslexia." And so we went to the principal. The principal, they wouldn't even talk to us until they're in second grade. So they're waiting until second grade so she can get so far behind before they'll even test her to see if there's some learning disabilities or if she needs special assistance. We did not agree with that, and I realized very early that I was going to have to fight for her. So first grade comes, and they're still not wanting to help. We ended up reaching out to some outside resources for testing, and to make sure that we were accurate in our assessment, and we were. I mean, we know our children. You know your children. You know if there's something off. Usually, and so we started fighting for her, and we started advocating for her to get it. We didn't want her to get 2 and 3 years behind, and so we really, really advocated. But we had to learn what we didn't know. We didn't know things about the school system. We didn't know that we didn't know really anything about the special education programs. We knew nothing about even the language that they use for the special education department. So we would go into these meetings, and they would talk around us and like, "Okay, here's your plan." And I'm like, "Whoa, wait a minute. I don't even understand the initials that you just used. Can you come back and explain this to
Right.
me?" And they really didn't want to waste the time. I mean, these meetings were down to 30 minutes once a year. And they had a whole plan for your child for the whole year for within 30 minutes, and it was just kind of spoon fed to you. And I was like, this is not working for us. And I really had to learn a lot of things and how to fight the school system, honestly. And at some point during COVID, she was, we realized pulling her out of school because all the kids went home, everybody was learning from home, and that was not working. And so she really just missed a year of school. And she was already behind, and we just had a lot of concerns talking about that social concern. I had a lot of concerns for her socially, educationally, emotionally. And we were really nervous about what was happening in the school system and about in government, some of the things they were putting in place. And I did not have the ability to homeschool like we just saw, like our friend that we just saw. And I wish I had. I wish that was an option for me, but it wasn't. And so we had to find an option that worked for us. And we did that. We went outside of the public school system and did find a school that specialized in learning disabilities. That really she's done great in. She's excelled in. She's done fantastic. But they created a learning plan based on her. And it was so interesting, once she learned because in public school, if you're behind on a concept, like say, whatever the concept is, they just keep going. If you
Oh,
don't get
yeah.
it, they just keep going,
Yeah.
and then you're way behind. Then by the end of the year, you don't learn anything. So, they designed a learning plan that was for her, and they stay on one concept until she gets it. And then that concept, after she gets it, usually you don't have any more issues until maybe the next one way down here, and you're behind. So they stay there until you get it. And she has done beautifully, but it was really taking the time to step back and say, teach me what I don't know. The system isn't working for me. Let me find something that does.
Absolutely. I mean, I won't go into depth, but I have a nephew who also he was struggling with a lot of disabilities. And in the end, they put him in a program here in Texas in a school where they basically just taught him how to make it through life, like how to cook, how to wash clothes, and realized that that was going to be more important than worrying about, all the stuff about science and all the things that just didn't make any sense. But I think the biggest thing here is just encouraging parents, stop checking out when your kids are studying and find out what they're learning. Ask the teachers, ask the school what their textbooks look like. I don't want to, accuse anyone of anything, but I will just tell you there is stuff that is being taught in
Yeah.
schools that you
Yeah.
do need to be careful of, and you need to find out what you can do to stand up against that.
Yeah.
And also just keep reminding you that homeschooling is not always the answer. I homeschooled my own daughter towards the end, and she really did not like it at all. But at the time, it was the best solution because of the way that we were traveling and I was speaking in different places. She did go to school some throughout her life. The last 2 years of my life, ended up homeschooling, and I absolutely loved it. I graduated at 16 and went on to study in Bible school at that age. But it's not for everybody. And it is important, if you're involved in church and you're looking to homeschool, at least if they're going to, well, it used to be Sunday school. A lot of churches don't even do that anymore. But at least if there is some kind of a children's program where they are interacting, but they do need to be somehow involved with other children.
Yeah.
But I think the most important thing is there are many alternatives that you can look at, like what you said. I think you ended up in private school, didn't
Yeah.
you? And trust me, that's not always something that people can afford because it's expensive. I mean, most private schools where I've even taught, it's not cheap.
Yeah. I think the most important thing is to advocate for your child. And one thing that we didn't even talk about is what about our gifted and talented children
Yes.
that are way so far ahead of the classroom, and they're bored. They're doodling on paper because they're so far ahead of the classroom, and they're being capped,
To be honest with you, when you are a teacher in a public school, what parents may not realize is we are supposed to come up with a differentiated plan for the gifted and talented, which are referred to as the GNT that you're referring to, not gin and tonic, obviously. And then you have the other spectrum where they have special needs, and those special needs are not always the
Yeah.
same. And then you've got your kids who are ADHD or just, some are on medication, some are not. So we'd have all these folders, and some parents don't realize that for a teacher, it is difficult because you're sitting there having to create 6 different lesson plans every time that you teach a lesson. And it's not easy when you are, you've got 30 something kids in the classroom, even though they tell you 28 is supposed to be the max, but they push it to 30. 32 used to be the limit that you could then start squealing that, they have to stop. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that, with the gifted and talented that you mentioned, what you don't realize is a lot of times they get given a sheet of paper. For example, in math, they have done the concept, they've answered the problems, and they've got it. And so because you don't know what else to do with them and you're trying to help the other kids who find that a bit more difficult, they would just hand the G&T kids another sheet full of those same problems and just say, here, just work on this and get some more practice in. what parents don't realize that when we go to the trainings and stuff that we have to go to as teachers, the worst thing you can do for a GNT child is to give them busy boredom work, because that's exactly what happens. It's, I'm sorry, I've got this. Why are you making me do 10 problems of the same when I already know how to do it?
They're
You're
not being
just trying to keep
stretched.
me busy
Yeah.
because you can't teach me. And so you'd be better off to find things that they would have to figure out that would
Right.
challenge them.
They have to be stretched. They have to
Yes.
learn, not
And
yeah.
and again, that's not always easy. So maybe as a parent, you can provide, solutions or ideas. And I'm not saying you're trying to do the job for the teacher. I think it's just recognizing that a teacher does have a lot on their plate, and they're, trying to come up with all these different plans. But I think more than anything, what we want to say to you today is, for those of you that can and feel the need and want to, champion that, those of you that can't, find alternatives to what you can do to really, pour into that.
Yeah.
Um,
Amen.
and Mandy, just, I always like to highlight, at least a biblical character here, but one of the ones I wrote down was Hannah. And, Hannah wanted a child so badly. And she prayed and prayed and prayed and finally got the child. And then, the husband wanted to take him straight away and start preparing him educationally. And she said she wanted him to wait. And at the time that she names in the word, actually, they figure that it was to wean him by the time he was 3 so that he would be ready to go off and be taught certain things. And then we have Esther, who obviously, went. A lot of people don't realize, when you read that story, she probably was about 13 or 14 when she went to the palace, because it took many years to prepare her to become Queen Esther. So it wasn't like she got there, she was already being groomed for that. But the choices that were made for those situations are choices that parents had to make or family had to make, because it was the best choice that God had for them. So I think my encouragement here is, do seek God. And if you're married, please do it together. Sit down and discuss, and don't be afraid to talk about the pros and cons about it and what would that look like. And if you are going to homeschool, find support groups of other parents who are doing that, because there's lots of them where you can do things together with them. You can even talk to curriculum providers to help along that line. But then if you can afford it, there are private schools. There are other alternatives that they can go to. So, and I just want to say to parents out there, it is not easy. And I feel for you. I know that it's hard. Even though I love teaching, there are days when you just want to look at them and say, "You know what? I'm done today." But don't give up on seeking out what's the best for your kids. So that's just the main thing I want to say to you today.